kind of odd though, weird, kind of a weird feeling that like none of our spouses have any inkling of who Darryl is. They hear us talking about, oh, he was quirky or he was geeky, you know, they know like a few stories, but none of them know Darryl at all.
Yeah.
You know, and he was like totally a part of our lives for so long.
Well, probably the thing that I'm most familiar with, that no one else is when Darryl was born. Darryl was our first child, and we were very excited because your dad and I were older when we got married, and so we were anxious. Well, I was 23 and he was 25, and so we were excited when we found out we were going to have our first baby. And Darryl, I was sick for almost the whole 9 months, and I thought, well, this baby better be worth it. Darryl was actually a little bit late, but not a lot. I think a couple of weeks. But Dad was supposed to fly to Guam or Alaska or one of those places, and he was going to be gone 6 weeks. And so the doctor decided that we probably needed to induce my labor with Darryl. So I went in on a Monday morning, and Dad will probably tell the story of what happened, but he actually had to fly that day, and it turned out that something happened with the plane. They still don't know what happened, but anyway, it filled with smoke, and he can tell you the details. But he was able to land, and so he was able to be there. I was having a lot of trouble, and they was afraid Darryl might not be well. They actually went in and used forceps so they could deliver Darryl because his heart rate was going down, and in fact they told Dad that he might not be alive. So
wow.
Anyway, he was born, and he was pretty messy because he was in trouble, and but fortunately he looked pretty beat up because when they put the forceps on his head, he was all cut up and scratched and whatever, but in 24 hours he hardly noticed. When he was first born, he looked pretty beat up, and he really did have bad colic. I used to carry him around the house with a little water bottle on my arm, and with him laying over the water bottle, and that's the way I would do my work. So that's the only way I could keep him from just screaming because he had such terrible colic. I'm surprised I ever had any more children, actually. But he was a really cute baby, and he was just a fun baby once he got past the colic stage.
When he was little, he loved the buttons and dials, and like an idiot, I was building an entertainment center. In those days, you tried to put everything in one thing. So I had this walnut thing with sliding glass door, or sliding walnut doors, and all the buttons for horizontal, vertical, and everything to do with TV were right down near the floor with no cover. So Darryl just loved turning those buttons, and particularly when I'm watching a favorite program.
It was one of those nights when Dan wanted to watch something on the TV, and Darryl would crawl up to the TV and turn all the knobs. And Dan would go over and tell him not to, and then he would sit there and just sort of look at him. As soon as his dad would leave, he'd turn all the knobs again.
And I remember I'd come home from flying, and after a hard day of flying, I liked to watch the evening news, which was Huntley Brinkley in those days. And he's over there flipping the buttons, and I'm saying, no, 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 don't do that. And pulling him back and trying to be a nice dad. And he'd crawl back over there and flip them again. So I slapped him on the hand so he wouldn't do that. And I hadn't slapped him before. And he looked at me in surprise and started welling up tears in his eyes, and crawls right back over there and flips a button. It's kind of like, it was a war between him and me.
Pretty soon it became sort of a battle, you know, with Dan spanking his hand and him crying, and with tears running down his face, he'd reach over and turn on the knobs. And I think I was in the kitchen or the dining room or something, and I heard this battle going on, and here's this 1-year-old and this officer in the military, and it was obvious that neither one of them was going to give in. So I finally had to pick Darryl up and take him out of the room to end the battle.
But that was the beginning of his interest in buttons and dials and things. He wanted to know everything there was to know in the world, and then use that in his second grade class. And the teacher was teaching them about the electron and the proton and the neutron and how they work, and she had it all backwards. And Darryl corrected her in class. And second grade teachers really hate their second grade kids to tell them how it really is.
And you know, I'm grateful for a good teacher, because she didn't beat him up because of that, but actually went home, I guess, and looked it up, and the next day came back and said, I need to apologize to you because Darryl was right. What I was teaching you was not the right thing about the atoms.
First memory really of Darryl is probably Beale Air Force Base. And he had this idea, he wanted to make a train. Probably heard about that, where he wanted to build a train that was like a real train that we could ride in around our backyard. And so, you know, he planned that, figured out how it would work. We'd go out in the backyard and figure out, you know, where it would go and all this kind of stuff. But we ended up moving and nothing really happened to that. But he was the kind of guy that, you know, he probably would have done something, you know. I tried to convince him to build a B-52 instead of a train because I was more into airplanes. And I wanted a B-52, but I couldn't figure out how we could get it to look like metal, because all we had was some boards and stuff like that. And I wanted it to look like a B-52. So we didn't do that either.
When we lived in Salt Lake across from high school, I'd have to ask Dad which high school it was because I was like 4 and 5. They were going to build a B-52 in the backyard. They were going to build a train, like a roller coaster in the backyard. And of course they never got all the way to a roller coaster, but they were dragging all kinds of things out there and building stuff and always working, and we'd hear these grand plans of what they were doing, and so it seemed to me like it would actually come to pass. So. And I was either 4 or 5. I started kindergarten there, but I'm not sure if I was in kindergarten yet. But he found me in the basement eating crayons. And I just remember that he was so concerned and he was so caring, And I remember him putting his arm around me and leading me up the stairs and saying, "Oh, you shouldn't eat crayons." And I said, "Why not?" And, "Oh, they're not good for you." I said, "Well, why don't you want me to eat crayons?" And he said, "Well, because I love you." And I just remember being totally startled, like, well, there's a weird idea, because they were just the boys doing boy stuff. They used to play toaster. They had they probably wouldn't want me to know that. That was in the same house. They had bunk beds, and they were downstairs, and we were upstairs, and Mom and Dad were upstairs, so I guess you feel like you can get away with more when you're, clear down there. But they play some game where, like, you get under the covers and take off your clothes, or take off some article of clothing or something, and then you were a piece of toast, and you'd pop out of your blankets. So they called that toaster, and they didn't...
Toaster was a game where we'd crawl under our bed and either wear something weird or take some clothes off or something and pop up behind the bed, however. So we'd come up with underwear on our head or, just something stupid like that. We called it toaster.
I don't know if they got caught doing it or they got in trouble or what, but I remember there was always this aura of mystique about this toaster game that I wasn't allowed to be involved in either.
And we did the thing that you've heard about where we got a chair and a tape recorder and a hose from the vacuum and put a blanket over it, and we pretend that we were flying at night, talk through the hose, and the hose would go out through the blanket, and Darryl would be the ground controller talking back, and I'd push little buttons on our cassette tape player and stuff like that. And that's when we started designing jet engines, and we had this SR-71, and we started thinking, we could design fast things like that. And so I would draw jet engines. I remember the compressors and all the little things. I think we looked in the World Book to see what a jet engine looked like. And Darryl started designing the airplane, and that's the one he designed was called the Supersonic Nadavonic Nadavu. I don't remember why we came up with that name, but it was kind of a neat looking little airplane.
They used to do some fun things. They used to have the Thunder Bikes, which was like the Thunderbirds, they drive their bikes in formation, and I remember they make me sit in a closet. Dad had a radio, maybe he still does, that could get Greenwich time. And I don't know what kind of a radio it was, but you could listen to languages all over the world on this radio. So they'd tune in to the Greenwich time, and it ticks like every second. And then it'll say, at the tone, it will be this time, That was exciting. They'd make me sit in this closet and listen to this and tick off the time. And I don't know, I had a notebook, I had to keep track of everything. And then they had walkie-talkies or something, and they would, I was supposed to tell them the time, or when they were doing things, they wanted to know the exact time that it was, and so that was my job, to tell them. And so there were some fun things like that they did. And he liked that aspect of it, it was sort of scientific to do everything by the exact Greenwich time.
And that's where we had the Thunder Bikes. I got into overhauling bikes and all that. Darryl was more into walkie-talkies and, the electronics and stuff. So he would be the ground station, and me and Mike would be the Thunder Bikes, So we would overhaul our bikes like every day and put them on stands and put them by the garage door and say they were on alert, ready to go. And basically the only missions we ever had were to go on reconnaissance of the next street up, see if anything was going on over there. So I think I would wear Dad's Air Force flying jacket, and we'd try and go early in the morning or some sneaky time, And Darryl would get on the walkie-talkie, and we'd go around, no, we don't see anything going on, and come back in and park our bikes. And we did obstacle courses. We put toilet paper rolls on the back of our bikes, and we'd put X's on the streets and try and drop a rock through the toilet paper hole and hit the X. It was the bombing, so Darryl, I think, was the bombardier a few times, and I would be the pilot. So, but that always bugged me because I thought, how could we really ever use that? You couldn't bomb the next street up by dropping a rock on there in the middle of their street, so I always liked things that were real,
Somewhere in there, he took up playing the trumpet, which must have been, I don't think he started in elementary, so it must have been in junior high or somewhere where he started playing the trumpet. And he really liked that. He never got very good. And he was hard to listen to. And I can remember one time going to a church thing. I don't know if it was like a talent show or what, but he played some song like the Star Spangled Banner. And he go to hit the high note and he can't quite do it, and he tried to make it sound like he did it on purpose, and I was just sitting there going, oh man.
I remember him playing the trumpet in sacrament meeting.
Really?
Yeah. You wouldn't hear that much nowadays, but he loved the trumpet, he really, I'm sure he felt like he was really good at it. I was only a kid, so I don't actually know how good he was. But he wasn't bad. He had played in the marching band all the time and stuff. But he played it, he had some song he practiced and he played it with a mute so that it wouldn't be too loud in church. And he played his trumpet in church.
I think that was in Temple, Texas, and I remember him in the Temple High School band and going to some of his concerts, like going to, I went with Mom, and so I think the family, we went to one of his concerts and he was playing the trumpet. And,
do you remember if he was any good?
yes, he was very good. And I remember him practicing all the time on his trumpet, and he loved music.
He had wet shoes and he wanted them to dry out quickly. So he stuck them in the microwave. And I don't even recall, he must have turned it on. But they weren't in there very long when Dad came in and saw that his shoes were in the microwave. And he just went ballistic, He was like, you're a brilliant kid, you have no common sense. He used to say that about Darryl a lot, that he had no common sense. And he pulled them out, and, not only the fact that microwaving shoes is a bad idea, but also just the fact that his grody shoes were in the microwave, like where you put food. So Dad really reamed him for that one.
And this is when he started getting into high school. He got a girlfriend named Kim, and their whole family of people that lived out in Gatesville. And one of my memories about them was they were, to us, seemed real country, hick type of family. And but Darryl and Kim was not the country hick, but the rest of her family kind of was. But Darryl and Kim were just perfect, because Kim would wear these kind of bizarre clothes and Darryl would wear his red three-piece double knit suits, to school with his white shoes. And
I remember him and his girlfriend Kim in the car. That he really enjoyed Kim's company.
Kim Wall.
Kim Wall. I remember that quite a bit, actually.
His one true love was Kim Wall from Temple, Texas. And they were together for quite a while. She was just a sweet little country girl. She was also smart and stuff. She lived out in this farm. She had these hillbilly parents, and well, her dad was kind of funny like that. And they had horses, and you know, but she was just a really good girl, and he was always the gentleman, you know. But when she got old enough to date, they would date, and I remember one year he bought her a watch for Christmas. It's when we lived in Belton. And he'd saved his money, bought her this really nice watch, and he put it in a lockbox in his drawer, one of those metal boxes. And somebody who knew that he had it broke in his window and took the lockbox and took the watch out. And I think they left the box and everything and just took the watch.
Wow.
So it had to be somebody that knew that he had it there. But he was just devastated because it was going to be like the perfect Christmas present for her and whatever, and he had to go out that day and buy like a little necklace or something. She was the only one, I think, that I can think of that I knew that he loved her. Not so much in high school, but in college he tried to date. It wasn't really his nature, and he wasn't all that good at it. He was socially kind of backward. But he would try. He'd ask girls, and they'd turn him down a lot. And it didn't, I'm sure he didn't like it, you know, but it didn't devastate him. He would move on to the next girl and try again, you know.
We used to talk a lot about how he, you know, he really wanted to get married. And he would talk about women and how he didn't understand them. And how when he would go on his first date, he would make it clear that he was serious. He was not dating for fun. He wanted to get married, have children, you know, and he would tell them that on the first date. And for the most part, they never wanted to go out with him again. I mean, that just freaked him out, you know. But we would talk about that, you know, and I would tell him he was kind of a dork, and, you know, he knew that he was different, you know. But he's like, I don't see any point in messing around, you know, I'm not joking around anymore. You know, that was after he was already sick, and he was serious about life, you know.
And I know when he was in the City of Hope, and you know, he didn't have any hair, and he had to wear a mask, and when they finally would let him out of the hospital even, but he had to stay with a hospital mask on and stuff, some girls invited him to like a young adult dance, and they were having a dinner, and he couldn't eat the food because he wasn't allowed and whatever, because he still had no immune system hardly, but they took him anyway, went and got him and took him to this dance, and he danced, and he was always very grateful for that, because he knew he was a sight, and these girls probably, you know, it was kind of a sacrifice for him probably to take him, but he was very appreciative of people that would be willing to try and get to know him.
It's one of the first things that pops in my head when I think of Darryl, because in my mind it describes him as a person, and that was the time that I was looking in the newspaper on a Monday or something at the car section. I always looked at the cars. I was 15 or 16, and I was just checking prices, you know, Porsche 911, stuff like that. I just did that a lot. I wasn't planning on buying anything. And he asked me what I was looking at, and I told him I was looking at an Opel GT that was $1,500. He said, which car was that? And I said, that's the one that looks like a miniature Corvette. You know, it was like a 1970. And he said, why don't we call them up and see if they have it? So we called them, and they had it. And he said, let's go test drive it. And I thought, oh, that's kind of weird, because I hadn't even crossed my mind that we'd be thinking about buying it. So we went out there, and we got in it and test drove it. It was dark. Drove it up and down Tramway. And I remember the car running really well, and inside it was lit like orange or something. It was kind of funky. And Darryl liked it, and I liked it. And we got back to the house. We got out of the car. It was a really rich family, and they came out, and the mom came out and said, so what'd you think of it? And he said, can I bring you a check in the morning? And I looked over at him like, what? What are you talking about, you know? And of course he didn't say anything to me, and we get back in the car, and I'm like, what is going on? He's like, I think you really like the car, and it's an interesting little car. $1,500 sounded like a good price, so I'm going to go ahead and buy it. We'll figure out a payment plan for you and everything, and it'll be your car. Next morning we woke up. I woke up like it was Christmas morning and drove out there. He just wrote her a check for $1,500, and I drove the car. I drove it for the next few months, and he actually died just 3 months, I think, after we purchased that car. And that's one of the stories I remember the most. Very spontaneous and very kind.
I remember when he came home from his mission, I guess they found that he was ill, or he had cancer, so he came home on the airplane, and that's when they had us all tested. I remember us going in the hospital, and we all had shots taken to see whose blood matched. And I remember it was a couple days before that they told us that I was the one that matched. And I think Darren was on his mission at the time, so they didn't know if he could have matched or not. And that, I was real thankful. And
Were you scared?
yeah, a little bit scared, but I knew I could help him in some way, maybe. And it was kind of like, it's me. I was kind of shocked in a way, but I just remember the day of the day of the surgery that they rolled me in and they put oxygen mask over my face and they told me to count backwards, and then the next thing that I remember is waking up on the bed, and so I don't remember any of the surgery part.
Which is good, I suppose.
And I was really sore. I just remember that I couldn't walk or anything for a couple of days, and then I remember Darryl saying that we're blood sisters now or something. So that was.
Maybe it was at the end of the semester. He decided to stay home that next semester, and me and Debbie were up at college, and he was back in Albuquerque because he just wasn't up to being at BYU anymore because of his health, and he went over, for the checkup, and that's when it just was fairly sudden to us. We had no idea that he was getting sick again, or at all to the point of dying. It was a big surprise. And Dad called me and Debbie at BYU, and
but we got called and told basically that Darryl was going to die, and if we wanted to see him at all alive, then we needed to come right then. And chances were that even if we did leave right then, it would be too late, that he was going to die within the next day. And so Darren and I decided we were going to go. We didn't want to not see him. I mean, he'd been at home, and so we hadn't seen him because we'd been at school. So we both went to our teachers and just told them we were going to be in class, and we jumped in his car and took off. And my memory of the trip is like, it was like went by in a flash. I mean, I have hardly any memory of the drive. But all I remember about the drive was we were really focused on Darryl not dying. And we both were praying that he would live till we got there. Sorry. But we didn't know it at the time, but I guess Mom and Dad had prayed to let him go. And he didn't go, and they didn't understand it. But Darren and I just really felt like he would wait for us. And I remember that as we drove, we didn't feel worried that he was going to die before we got there. So we got to the hospital, and we went in, and we were just shocked at how he looked. I mean, terrible. He was like bright orange. I mean, just a color that you don't think a human being can be. And his eyes were teary, and the tears were just like the orangest orange you can imagine coming out of his eyes. And but I guess basically he'd been snowed, so he was totally on morphine and not able to communicate or anything. But when we walked in the room, he opened up his eyes and he looked at us and he tried to talk, but he couldn't speak. And Mom just said, "Darryl, it's okay. You don't need to say anything." And, we just told him we're here, it's okay. And he didn't say anything, but he tried to, and then he just closed his eyes again. And so we sat with him, and Darren, just, I guess, felt really overwhelmed by how he looked and everything. And so he at that point went out to the car.
I just remember thinking, there's no way he's going to get better. He's going to die. Why continue to suffer like this? So I went out into the parking lot and said a prayer, to have, please let Darryl go. And went back in, and he was gone. It was that fast.
I was in the room at the time, and I remember Darryl was breathing like really rarely. Like he would take a really deep breath, and his whole body would shake with the breath. And then like 30 seconds would go by. I mean, just like what seemed like a really long time would go by, and he'd take another one of those breaths. And somehow he took a breath, and he let it out, and just, we knew. Like, Mom and I were both sitting next to the bed, Dad was standing in the room, and all three of us knew that he was gone. Even though, like, normally it would have taken a long time to wait for the next breath. We knew that there wasn't another breath. Like, he was just gone. And, I don't know how we just felt it. And so, we started to cry, and Darren walked back in the room after that. So, between the time it took him to go to the car and come back, Darryl left.
And we all kind of looked up, and we figured he was probably in the room looking at us. And we'll get the story from him later on, if he floated around and, watched us for a while and all that. But it was weird. When you look at his body, we knew that was not Darryl anymore. Darryl was somewhere else, and that was an odd time.
It was really hard because it was unexpected, but just knowing, he saw us, and we knew he recognized us. We knew he realized we were there, and so that made a big difference.
I just got a call. I was on my mission. And Dad called me. He died in the morning, and they called me in the evening. They'd been trying to call me all day, but I'd been out teaching, and we had a zone conference, and after that we had a meeting that went late, and so they didn't get me until...
Did you even know that he was in the hospital?
No. I had just received, not maybe a week before that, a tape, because we used to send these tapes back and forth. And he said he was doing fine, and he was going back for a checkup, but he was doing this and he was doing that. I mean, there was nothing out of the ordinary. He had his future planned, for the next little bit on the tape. Wow. So to me, it was really a shock. So Dad calls me, and he just says, he said, "Are you sitting down?" Which is a terrible way to start a conversation. And he said, "Your brother passed away this morning." And I just immediately started crying and saying, no, because, you immediately go into denial. And what I was thinking in my head was, no, because I didn't get to say goodbye to him. He can't be gone because it's too abrupt. I need to be able to say goodbye or say something. And I can't. And so after we hung, because then I was crying and Dad was crying, and we couldn't really even have a conversation, so we didn't talk very long. But then I was in my room just crying. My companion didn't know what to do with me, and she was just standing there. She was horrified and terrified all at the same time. And I had some feelings that were pretty strong. One was that Darryl would come to me if I wanted him to. But I recoiled from that. My immediate response was no, because that would be scary. That would be, and I didn't know what that meant. Come to me? What does that mean? I don't want to see him as I don't want to see any spirit. Even though now I think, oh, well, I wish I'd had that chance. But at the time, my first response was fear. So then the next immediate thought that came is, oh, good, because Mom needs me more anyway. And then it was like he was gone. But with that feeling, I also knew, without a doubt, that Darryl did not want me to go home for his funeral or even entertain the notion.
Wow.
Because the funeral meant nothing to him. And missionary work meant everything to him. I was to stay right where I was and keep doing it, and it would be fine.
Wow.
And it's interesting that Mom, as we talked later about that, she that night felt Darryl's presence, which is seems reasonable. She also felt that although she wanted me to, and I probably could have gone home if I'd wanted. I was a stateside mission. I could have gone home and come back. It's, a death in the immediate family is a reason for that. She felt that she was not to ask me to come home. So she didn't. And I never asked because I knew I wasn't supposed to. And then later on we talked and found out that we both had that feeling. So I felt like that was his goodbye message to me. And then later, and I had an experience where the day that he died, we had the Zone Conference, and me and my companions sang at it. And in preparation for the Zone Conference, we had learned the song "The Test," which is,
right.
Tell me God, why did you die? And we memorized that whole song. And then the day before, we thought, it doesn't really go with the theme. It's kind of a different song. So we sang something completely different at the Zone Conference. But as soon as I calmed down from hearing that Darryl died, the words from the test started going through my mind, and they ran continuously for 3 days.
Wow.
They didn't leave me. And then I found out later that that song was sung at his funeral.
Right.
So I think that also was he in the Lord's way of just telling me it was okay.
The weekend before Darryl passed away, I had no idea he was going to pass away. I don't think anybody did, And I thought he was all better. I was 16, The only things that really mattered to me was me, my car, Terry Stevens, my girlfriend. That was about it. And I was driving down the freeway taking him to the airport, and I don't know how the conversation started, but I knew I had made him a little bit mad. And he was talking to me about how I needed to mature. I needed to think more about other people, be more of a help around the house. And I just didn't want to hear any of that, And so I was just giving him trouble. Basically, we were fighting the whole way to the airport. And it really was making me mad inside. I thought, here's my brother who's always perfect and everything. And I knew I wasn't. And it was just really getting on my nerves. So when we got to the airport, rather than taking his bags, walking him to his gate, and doing all those things, I took his bags out, set them on the curb, got back in the car, and drove away. I'm sure he had to carry his bags by himself to the ticket gate, whatever, all that stuff. But I was upset about it, and so that's actually the last time I ever talked to Darryl. And the night I found out he was going to die, I just kept thinking, the last time I talked to Darryl, really, we never fought. It was rare, And yet the last time I talked to him was like a terrible fight, and I'd leave in a scuff, and just drop him off. So I always felt like dirt, and he passed on, and for probably a good 6 to 8 months, anytime I thought about Darryl, I had that terrible empty feeling inside, like, oh man, the last time I talked to him, I was in a fight with him. And one morning I woke up, and I just felt a lot better about my situation with Darryl. I had had a dream, and it felt very real, and I honestly, all the guilt was gone, and I felt like everything was fine, and it was no big deal. So I remember that morning, I just said, Dad, I had a dream about Darryl last night. I feel really a lot better about that last situation that happened before he died. And Dad went running out of the room, I remember, and came back in with a pad of paper, sat down and said, I need you to tell me exactly what the dream was about. So I told him what happened in the dream, and what happened was I was sitting in a waiting room waiting for Darryl. Felt sort of like it was at an airport, that there was ramps going up and down and things like that. And I was sitting there, and I knew I was waiting for Darryl. And then Darryl came walking down a ramp into the same room as me and kind of started to walk past me, like at a really fast pace, which is how I always remember Darryl walking. And I'm like, Darryl! What's going on? It's good to see you again, kind of thing. And he's like, oh yeah, hey Dave, how you doing? I'm kind of busy, whatever. And he sort of walks on, and I'm walking behind him, and probably 3 feet behind him and a little off to his left. And he's just really in a hurry to get somewhere. And I'm like, so how are things going, And he said, well, I'm actually really busy. Things are going great. I've got a lot of stuff to do. But I wanted to stop by and tell you that that last experience we had on the way to the airport, that little fight we had, that is no big deal. It's nothing. I mean, we lived a life together as brothers. That's just one experience we had. And I didn't want you to think that that's the way things end up. He said, that was nothing. I don't ever think about it. And I remember just thinking, oh, that's good, Because I certainly don't have memories of Darryl of fighting with him at all. And he said, I just want you to know I'm happy, I'm busy. And as we're walking along, we get up to a hallway that gets a lot skinnier and a wall. I, of course, choose to walk down the hallway, and he starts to walk through the wall. And I go, Darryl, you just walked through that wall, And he said, oh, yeah, I didn't even realize that you didn't know I could do that. And he said, I can also walk up the wall. And he walked up the wall. And I was like, wow, that's cool, And that was really the only weird part of the dream. It was kind of quirky, but then he walked down the hallway with me, and we got to another waiting room with 2 or 3 paths that went up again. And there were like gates, and I just knew I couldn't go past that gate, like if you were at an airport and the gate was going to the airplane. So I stopped, and he just kind of kept walking. And I was like, Darryl, I called down the hallway thing, and he turns around and he's like, oh yeah, that was it. I really just wanted to tell you, there's no problems, we're brothers, everything's good, I'm busy, and that's it. And I was like, okay, well, it's good to see you. And I woke up, and it was a pretty short dream and sweet, and I remember everything really well, which is rare for me. I don't remember dreams that well, but I've always since felt fine about my relationship with Darryl, and that everything was good between us.
I did, not too much after that, maybe within a couple of months of his death, I had a dream where he came to me and he said, I want to show you where I am, where I live, so you won't worry. So I said, okay. So he takes me to this place that had buildings, and it had, not big buildings, but buildings, and it had a paved road, like only a pedestrian road. There were no vehicles or anything, but it was like a brick paved kind of a road, and there were some park benches. It was very pretty, grass and flowers and whatever. But he was so busy. He said, you need to wait right here. I got to run over here and do this thing, and then I'll come right back. And so I'm just waiting in the middle of the street. I never got outside of the street. I never went inside a building, or I would have liked to look around a little bit, but he left me in the road and on a bench, and he'd say, just sit here, and I got to run do this thing, and then I'll come back. And people came up to me because they knew I wasn't dead. And they were intrigued. So it's like, oh, hi, you just visiting? Yeah, I'm just here visiting my brother, And then he'd run back, and he'd just kind of check on me. You could see, okay, you're talking to people, I really got to run over here. He was just super busy through the whole thing. And it wasn't a long dream, but... And then that was kind of the end of it. And he just said, I just didn't want you to worry. I just wanted you to see that I'm okay. And I said, okay. It did bring some peace. I felt like he's happy. He was clearly busy. He had lots of work to do. There were other people there, It was a very nice place. So I felt like that was our chance to say goodbye to each other. But we both know it's not for that long in the scheme of things.
Darryl was a wonderful example. He did everything right. I just sort of followed in his footsteps. We always knew we were going on a mission. He went on a mission. I knew he had a testimony. I always had a testimony. I don't think, people didn't really feel sorry for him because they knew that he had lived life the way it was supposed to be lived.
Well, we have borrowed a very fancy recorder from the Burke family, where we have spent our time the last week. They've got a VCR recorder, and he was showing me how to use it. I do hope I'm using it right.
Well, you got a blinking red light. I guess that means it's okay.
Time is 11:20. This is what, the 30th day of December?
Yep.
Or thereabouts. We'll be leaving on the airplane this afternoon at 2 o'clock, going back to Albuquerque. Seeing here some Christmas cards.
Hey, give
Got
me
a
that
bunch
news.
of- Which one?
Which one?
The one I gave you yesterday, Dad, that you opened up.
Is this it?
Yeah, hand it to me.
Musical?
Come here, where you can see this close.
All right. Now this will pick
This
it up,
Christmas
too.
card I received yesterday.
Who's that from?
It's from Odell's daughter, who
A
goes by
musical
the name
Christmas
of
card.
Carrie Fisk.
Weird.
How neat. So, how you feeling?
Well, I feel pretty good. I I probably can get up in a little bit.
Need a little exercise today?
Well, I already walked down to X-ray this morning,
Okay.
and they took an X-ray picture. I'm beeping.
Well, this is going to be played, I guess, at Uncle David's house later tonight. You want to tell him anything? How you feeling, or how's it gone for you so far? Or?
Oh, I feel great, and it's gone great for me so far. You'll probably want a picture of me walking around in the hallway.
All right.
You,
Why don't we...
you can turn that off and on, right?
Yeah.
Because what they'll probably do here in the next few minutes, because my cyclosporin's finished, is uncap me from this machine, and then I can walk around on my own, and we can walk around the halls and talk.
All right. Sounds like a good program. We'll get that nurse in here and take care of your business, and then we will go for a walk.
Okay.
You new stuff, or
Okay.
you new white cells running around?
Why don't you close your eyes and
Actually, they say I'm down to
then they
500.
think that's your trademark.
Why?
You're down to 500 again?
Yeah, they say bone marrow grows in cycles. They say when it grows real fast, you don't notice the cycle very much, but when it grows slow, you can see it pretty often.
You got to get away from the window now to see your face because the camera's picking up
So
the
you're
window and
going,
shutting down.
you went from 900 to 500?
Well, the doctor said it's going to go up and down.
Aye.
That much. That much?
You can close the window. Well, it probably needs a light.
It
Flip
needs,
on this light.
it needs the light. I just didn't need to
Flip
point
on the
out
light.
into it.
Can we
Look on the
start?
right there. It's on you.
Now, Darryl has taken this
You probably get a
camera
better
that
picture
I have
of it.
borrowed and figured out how to put Doherty 1983 on the screen. So the thing you
Don't
see
leave it on too
is
long.
Darryl's invention. And
Yeah, you can erase
so
that.
we're going to now go for a walk down the hall. Okay, Darryl's taking George, and we're going to be going down the hall here.
Fred.
Oh, Fred. I'm sorry about that. That's his companion. The nurse is wanting Darryl to take some blood today.
When I'm in your world, I wear a mask. When you're in my world. There you go.
Okay,
Come join the fun.
Darryl's going for a walk.
He goes for a run.
You go faster than I can keep up, Darryl.
You want real life then?
Well, let me get up with you so you can talk to me as we're going here.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Well, the camera can watch the scenery. I see it all the time. Hi, Di.
Hi, everybody. Got Diane?
Hey, where are we?
Hi. Well, this is the offices. We got dietitians. Signs that say nobody's supposed to smoke in the laboratory.
Okay, this unit is a circle, and Darryl walks around this circle
Patient
several
room.
times a day. These are all patient rooms.
I'd
on either
probably
side.
get that one. You can swing side to side. It's an interesting scene.
We had taken a picture of this bone marrow transplant thing, but they said the whole thing was obsolete, so we didn't.
Well, they took my picture the other day. They're going to redo it.
All right.
I'm going to use you. So here's the laboratory right here.
I got such a nice head, you know.
Yeah, right, the old brother. Okay. Anything else you need to say? We're running out of time here.
Oh, let's see. Love the family. Love California.
Hey, by the way, it's a beautiful day out there today. I don't know if we'll get a chance to shoot some pictures of it. It is nice.
strange.
Welcome. Thanks for coming to tonight's television show.
I'm enjoying myself already.
My name is Darren Lloyd Davidson. I was born the 23rd of April, 1963. What I have to tell you is the truth, as far as I recall.
Very nice, thank you. Is that a wrap?
I think that's a wrap.
Okay.